In 1996, Bill Gates said, "Content is king." And boy was he right. 3 decades later, it still occupies the throne. For lawyers, law firms, and companies serving the legal industry, content marketing and thought leadership marketing are a must if they want to build their books of business or increase their revenues. Hi, I'm Wayne Pollock. I'm a former AM Law 50 senior associate who discovered the world of content marketing and thought leadership marketing and hasn't looked back. In each episode of this podcast, I interview lawyers and legal industry in-house marketers who are doing big things with their content marketing and thought leadership marketing. This is Legally Contented. Welcome to episode number 11 of Legally Contented. I'm your host, Wayne Pollock. You're probably familiar with Lao Tzu's famous quote that the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. For my guest in this episode, Jim Hacking, the journey to more than 45,000 YouTube subscribers began in January 2013 with a single video. As you'll hear from Jim, who is an immigration attorney based in St. Louis with offices in DC and San Diego, those early videos weren't all beauties. He jokes that some of them looked like proof of life hostage videos based on the lighting and how he was positioned in the video. But Jim consistently shot videos, about 1,300 of them as of the time I'm recording this episode. And he eventually built a thriving law firm based on those videos and his marketing prowess. In this episode, Jim and I discuss his journey to running his own law firm, including the time he spent as a barge defense lawyer, why he began shooting and publishing YouTube videos, his process for shooting, editing, and publishing his videos, how his videos have powered his firm's marketing, how he staffed his firm when that marketing began to take off, and how his firm's marketing has allowed him to build his law firm in a way that's consistent with his vision for what his law firm could be. Now, I know what you might be thinking. I don't practice immigration law, or I don't have a legal practice that's a direct-to-consumer practice like immigration law, or my firm doesn't have that kind of practice. Well, as Jim and I discuss in this episode, YouTube can be an effective marketing and business development channel for any attorney, including those at big law and boutique law firms who serve large, sophisticated corporations and their in-house counsel. Whether you're on the fence about YouTube for you or your firm's content marketing or thought leadership marketing efforts, or you've decided there is no way in hell you're going to post videos of yourself on YouTube, I hope this episode nudges you ever so closer to actually taking the plunge on YouTube and starting a video content marketing strategy. Now, here's my conversation with Jim Hacking. Jim Hacking, welcome to Legally Contented. Please introduce yourself and tell us about yourself.
Hi, Wayne. Thanks for having me. Good to see you. I am an immigration lawyer practicing law throughout the United States. We have offices in St. Louis, which is our headquarters, and then we have offices in San Diego and Washington, D.C. We started the firm back in 2007 or late 2007, and then we niched down completely into immigration only in 2012.
And Jim, you and I met through one of your creations, which is Maximum Lawyer, which started off as a podcast and a Facebook group and has developed into something much more. We're going to cover that a little bit later in our conversation, but I asked you to join me, and I'm thankful for your time and your willingness to chat because you're doing something special with your marketing, specifically YouTube. As of right now, your firm has more than 43,000 subscribers to its YouTube page, and your most popular video has almost 300,000 views. Again, you're an immigration lawyer, 300,000 views. Your second most popular one has 131,000 views, and your third most popular at 97,000. So I want to dig into your YouTube strategy because obviously it's working and it's helping you build the firm, hopefully, of your dreams. But I want to take a step back. You mentioned niching down into immigration. Talk to me about how your journey from graduating law school to current day and how Hacking Law Practice became what it is in terms of an immigration firm.
So I graduated in 97 and I worked at a small sort of litigation firm for a year and a half. And then I ended up in a maritime firm when I was doing barge defense work for 10 years. I became a partner at that firm. And then I became obsessed with opening my own firm. I had seen lawyers beholden to other lawyers because they didn't have their own clients. And while this wasn't true at the maritime firm I worked at, I had seen it at other firms, and I'd seen people get stuck because they don't have their own clients. I was 36 at the time, and I didn't want to be 46 or 56 and having to start to look for my own clients. My wife is originally from Egypt, and I had become a Muslim in 1998. And so people at the mosque were always asking me for help. So I thought I would be a lawyer for immigrants. And I didn't necessarily think that I was going to do immigration. I thought I would do all kinds of different stuff for immigrants, but pretty quickly it became clear that the need and the desire for help was in the immigration field. So it took me a little while to finally throw in the towel and give up these other niches that I thought were going to make me money. But I was doing too many practice areas and I wasn't able to build any systems because it was all one-offs. And it was only when we decided to do nothing but immigration that we really started to see some traction.
What's a barge defense law firm look like?
Yeah, so that was great. It was just a great job. So I went to work for these two guys, Simon Tonkin and Jim Mondel, great guys. They had a practice where we had about 4 clients. They were fleeting companies and insurance companies. So, and this was all brown water admiralty work. So up and down the Mississippi, the Ohio rivers, these barges would get into accidents or deckhands would get injured and they would sue the insurance companies. And it was a good job, but it was, fighting over dents to metal, and it wasn't purely fulfilling. So I wanted to have something more. I wanted to be able to use my law degree for good, and I wanted to be able to help more people. So that's sort of why I made that shift. Now, when I told my wife, I've had this obsession of starting my own firm. I've always wanted to have my own firm. And she said, "Oh, really? We've been married for like 12 years and you've never mentioned it." And I said, because I was having that, what Michael Gerber calls the entrepreneurial seizure, where I thought I have to have my own firm. I have to have my own firm and I have to have my own clients. And so those guys at the maritime firm, they didn't want me doing all these, one-offs and these immigration things and everything. So even though I was a partner and we had 2.5 kids, we had a kid on the way. She had a job teaching. She was a lawyer too, teaching at the law school. So we had health insurance and the mortgage paid, and then the rest was going to be up to me.
Could you have, just pardon the pun here, but stayed the course at that firm and just built your book of business in a way that would have allowed you to eventually take over and that firm would become your own firm?
Probably, because when I left, the firm pretty much broke up. So that was sort of interesting. One time, one guy was 10 years older than me, the other was 20 years, and they went on their own for a couple more years, and then the older guy retired. So I don't know. I think so. I mean, I just, my heart wasn't in it. At the end of the day, the last case that I had was a maritime case, but it was a speedboat accident where a guy had died, and I had to go down and depose this guy's grieving mother. And I was like, this is not why I went to law school.
I wonder how many times those thoughts happen across the legal world each day, where someone is defending, maybe a company involved in the opioid crisis, or just some kind of unsavory feeling that someone gets. Like, you know what? If you want to do this kind of work, that's great. But me personally, I need something more fulfilling and more in line with my values. So that's interesting that you had that perspective. Putting aside operations and employees, because obviously running a law firm involves a lot of things and a lot of skills that you need to develop quickly to be successful. I want to talk about the marketing background that you had. When you were at that firm, before you left to launch your firm, were you marketing yourself then? Were you marketing the firm then?
No, I was the junior partner. I was pretty much an associate. And like I said, we had 4 clients. And my concern was that if one of those clients went away, that even though my partners were the 2 best guys in the world and treated me very well, that there just wouldn't be enough work for me. So their marketing consisted of, going and sort of meeting with insurance companies. We would go to New York once a year. We went to a barge fleeters convention in New Orleans, which actually was a lot of fun.
I'm sure.
But yeah, so they had these old time clients that they had brought with them when they started their firm. And no, so I was completely self-taught when it came to marketing. Now, I will say, Wayne, that the reason I felt so comfortable doing this was because I was about the same age as my father was when he went out on his own and started an architectural and engineering firm. So I had confidence from having seen him do that sort of in my late teens, early 20s. I knew that I could learn this stuff. But pretty quickly I figured out that I didn't know what I was doing at all. I had a really lame website. I was trying to do too many practice areas. It was really hard, again, to gain any traction.
So, what did you do to start gaining the knowledge you needed to begin marketing the firm? Because, all joking aside, barge defense work is very different from any direct to consumer type of law firm, especially immigration, where you've got a certain type of client with certain issues, certain thoughts, certain fears that are going to impact how they see you and how they come to your firm and what they want from you. So, how did you start to make that or make that transition from a not so marketing mindset to a more marketing mindset?
I knew I wasn't bringing in enough business, and I knew that my website sucked. So here's what happened. I was on my website and I was looking up another lawyer later on that day, and at the very bottom of the that guy's website, it said, "This website created by Foster Web Marketing, the premier lawyer marketing company in the world." I said, well, that's a pretty big claim. So I did an amazing thing. I clicked on the link, and when I clicked on the link, it took me to their website. And on that website, they had a lead magnet. Now, at this time, I didn't know what a lead magnet was. It was a lawyer's report on how to use Twitter to get clients. I said, well, I like Twitter, and I'm a lawyer, and I would like more clients. Let me click on that and download that free report. Well, little did I know that free report put me into a funnel. Of course, I didn't even know what a funnel was at that time. And I go into the funnel, and a week or two later, I find myself in a consult about whether or not I should hire them to build out a much better website for me. And of course, they gave me the whole show, and then they paused and said, this is going to cost $10,000. And they go, should I continue? And I said, why, yes, you should, even though I didn't have $10,000. So it was showmanship, it was lead magnet, it was funnel, it was, following up on hot leads. I learned about marketing by going through marketing, if that makes sense. And so that, I'll pause there so we can continue, but there's more to the story after that.
Yeah, I love being like the guinea pig for marketing, because you get to learn it yourself and you get to see. Like, there are times where I will sign up for a webinar that I am not going to want to buy their services, but I'm curious because I know they're a good marketer. And man, by like the 45-minute mark, I'm looking at my credit card thinking, should I do this? Even though I know objectively what they're selling me is not something I need or want, but they've done such a bang up job of selling to me during the webinar or on the follow-up emails. And it's almost like you have to like wink, it's like, okay, give them a nod. Like, yeah, I know what you're doing. And you're doing a damn good job because you've reeled me in, even though I don't want this. I don't need this. So continue on. So you finally, you're turning the corner and you're getting the website at least worked on. What happens next?
So then they said, hey, Jim, it's so great working with you. We're sort of partners with this fellow named Ben Glass. He's a attorney in Virginia who teaches lawyers, mostly personal injury, but at that time they were still doing other practice areas too. Teaches lawyers how to do marketing. Would you like to come to the conference? We can get you a discounted ticket. I said, well, yes, I would. So I flew to Virginia and I went and I joined. Of course, I'm a joiner, like you were just saying, Wayne. If I see good marketing, like I'm a sucker. Tyson loves to tease me at how fast I run to the back of the room to buy the course or sign up for whatever. So I went to the conference and I was in the second or third row. I started going every year. So I went for 2 or 3 years. And on the third year, there was a guy named Jerry Oginski, who's a medical malpractice lawyer in Manhattan. And he was making videos. And I was like, boy, that would be neat. And I said, oh my God, he has like 700 videos. That's amazing. And I have none. So Foster had a setup where you could go and do videos, and that was expensive. So I went and did videos with them. Those videos didn't get a lot of traction because I was still trying to be too general. And then eventually I started following a lot of Jerry Oginski's teachings, and then I started making my own videos.
Let's talk about that, because there's making videos and there's making videos. And I think that when YouTube first started and digital media first started, there was an expectation that anything you put out there had to be polished. It had to look good, great sound, maybe even a script, a teleprompter, the person, especially if it's an attorney, jacket, suit and tie, or blouse and pantsuit, like it has to look grade A, top level stuff. What did your first videos look like?
Oh my God, if you go back and look at some of them, I mean, I now have lighting for my videos, but back then I was even just using the blinking fluorescent lights from the office. So it looks like proof of life videos. And I'm talking like this, and boy, let me tell you what I learned at immigration today. And I would make these videos all over, and I would just put them out however they were. I know there's one where I'm like cut off like this, like I'm cut off from the nose down, and there's ones where there's these weird, creepy green backgrounds, and they're all still up there if anybody wants to look at my videos chronologically. But yeah, we were just making them with. At first, I had a high 8 Kodak little flip cam that I really liked, and then I started using my phone, and then I got another camera, and now I'm on my third camera. But yeah, for sure, there was back then people were trying to be too polished. Now, too much polish just telegraphs salesmanship. And the one thing I never did, and I got sort of lucky in two ways. One is I never did cuts, and it was just mostly because I was lazy. So I would just talk, and if I said or paused, I just let it go. And I think that built up my credibility because they could see that I knew what I was talking about, even though I fumbled a little bit, because I didn't feel the need to shield them from seeing how I really talked. And then the other thing that I got really lucky on is that I did a green screen. And by doing the green screen, I just used my firm logo behind me. And so the reason that was helpful was because people would see when YouTube suggested videos, they would see that blue background from my logo and they would know it was me. So my videos were always just sort of like, I'm looking at you now. If you're listening, you can't see this, but sort of my big fat head, just with a blue background and just me talking. And as far as content, this is what I really learned from Jerry is, as far as content, I didn't make it anything too extravagant. It was just someone calls the office, they ask me a question, and I say, boy, that would be an interesting video. That would be something people other than this person would like to know. So at first I did, the first 30 were like frequently asked questions. Then it was questions they should be asking. And then it was just, hey, what question did I get today? And if I knew the answer, I'd make the video. If I didn't know the answer, I'd go answer it for that person. I'd research it, answer for that person, and then I'd make a video about it.
Did you have time on your calendar that you set aside where you said, okay, today is Thursday, it is a video day, I'm going to bang out 5 or 6 of these? How did you work in doing videos with your normal day? Because, no matter how good of a person you are on video, you have to get in that mindset, right? You have to kind of step away from whatever you're doing, meeting with your colleagues, doing work, whatever, and then get into Jim, the YouTube video guy, and then get back to Jim, the attorney. So I'm curious, how did you arrange your calendar for the schedule?
So I'm not built that way. I can't do, I do now. I've had days where I do 7 or 8 videos, but I don't like them nearly as much. So for me, what I did, so back then I had a small little office and I had my desk on one side and I had the green screen on the other. So the camera was always pointed at the green screen. I think one thing that's really important about making content, especially if you're going to do it yourself, you have to make it drop dead easy. It can't be too many steps. You can't have too much work to do on the back end. You got to have somebody else do that so that it's just flip on the camera, record the message, and get out. And so what I would do, this is when we were next to my kids' Montessori. I would drop the kids off at the Montessori, 7:38. I'd walk in, I'd shoot my video. I'd usually put on a tie and a shirt like this, shoot my video, and then I'd change back to my normal sweatshirt, and then I'd go about and do my day. So I did one a day. I think I did one a day for about a year and a half, 2 different times.
When did you start to realize that you needed some help? Because I'm assuming you weren't the one who was going to be uploading it to YouTube, promoting it on social media. When did you start to see that this was more than maybe a one-person kind of job?
I did that very early. Because I knew that if I were the person doing all that extra work, that it would make it much harder and that I would be a bottleneck. So I got someone on Upwork to do it. And then eventually I had a friend and eventual colleague, Kent Richardson, who helped me. And then now my son edits them all for me on YouTube from school. So I actually pay him to do that, which is great because then I get to send him money and I get something in return for it.
How did you know that your target audience was going to be on YouTube?
That's a good question. I don't think that I did at first. I thought that, YouTube is the world's second biggest search engine. There seems to be, and I'll say this now after all these years, there seems to be an almost insatiable quest for information by immigrants. Like, I think that there's people always looking, there's people watching my videos at midnight. There's people, when you start to get comments and then when you start to get your first case, then that's sort of like a dopamine hit and you're like, ooh, I should keep doing this. I should do this more. So, I mean, it's so funny now. We can talk about it later, but like what we're doing now on YouTube and what we're about to do is just like light years beyond where we used to be. But back then I just, I started getting little hits, little comments, little shares. And I was just sort of stubborn. And, one of the guys I follow when it comes to marketing, Dean Jackson, says something that I think is really important when it comes to starting out a page like this. He wishes that the creator was prohibited for 365 days from looking at their stats. And I think that's really important because you could get down and think it's not going to work. But if you're consistent, and if you're sincere, and if you're real, that all comes through and people come to know you, like you, and trust you, which I think is the holy grail of marketing.
Well, it's interesting about knowing where your audience is at, because just like in technology, there's product market fit. Obviously, when there's marketing, there's message audience fit, content audience fit, and sometimes it's the substantive message, and sometimes it's where they are. Like if you're using the wrong channels to get to people, or you're giving them too much or too little, it's not going to work out. So it's, on one hand, YouTube has continued to grow since you began your videos. That's certainly helpful. You didn't, bet on Vine or, Google
Or
Google
Tumblr.
Plus or Tumblr, right? Like you in a way made an informed gamble that YouTube, owned by Google, wasn't going anywhere anytime soon. I'm curious, given your audience, was there a concern that you, a native English speaker, might not connect with people for whom English might not be your first language?
Well, that was a concern overall with immigration as a practice area. Was like, there are a lot of people who are immigrants. There are a lot of people who are immigrants who have legal problems. But then the question is, are there a lot of people who are legal immigrants who have problems that have money to pay? And then also, how are they going to understand what I'm saying? And I would say that everybody knows at least one person who speaks English who can help bridge that gap. Like we certainly have a lot of people in our office who speak different languages, and we've certainly used a lot of them to help us translate. But for the most part, immigration is such a important core issue. I mean, ultimately what we're fighting about is helping people come to the United States, helping people reunite with their family, helping people get on a path to citizenship. If you have a hierarchy of needs, those are pretty high up on the list.
Do you have any concern that you beating up on USCIS in your videos is going to come back to haunt you? Because I have clients, when they want to take a real adversarial approach in articles they write for legal industry publications or industry publications, they want to create a villain out of the insurance company or out of the Department of Corrections. But they have to be careful because they see those lawyers or lawyers for those entities on the other side of the case and on the other side of the settlement table on almost a weekly basis. So yeah, it might be fun to puff out your chest and talk smack about your adversary, but it could also come back to bite you in the rear when you can't resolve a case quickly in the best way for your client because the adversary is holding a grudge because you went out on YouTube 2 weeks ago and said something. So I'm curious, did you have any concerns? Is it even a concern for you, given it's the big, bad federal bureaucracy?
Seth Godin and Dan Kennedy, two marketing geniuses, taught me that if you try to be pleasing to everybody, then you won't make a difference. No one will notice you. No one will stand out. So I had to make a conscious decision to stick my finger in the eye of USCIS and those who hate immigrants. And I think of those as two different groups. So like I had to recognize that there's 30-40% of America that's going to hate my content. And I had to recognize that, and I take a different approach with USCIS. So my videos, while combative, are in line with my approach. I have sued USCIS or the State Department over 1,000 times. It's my favorite thing. I don't go there asking for favors. I kick them in the teeth and I let the chips fall where they may. And I don't say that with any kind of bravado, but I did have those concerns, right? And so one day, I'll just tell you a quick story. One day I was in New York. This was probably about 4 years into the YouTube channel. I was in Manhattan, my first immigration case in the Big Apple. I walked all the way down from Times Square to lower Manhattan where USCIS is. And I'm like, ooh, I finally arrived. I've got this immigration case. And so it's really busy and crowded there. So I was going to meet my client in the waiting room. And this person comes running up to me and he has a lanyard around his neck with his USCIS ID. And he goes, "Are you that YouTube guy?" And I go, I go, yeah. And so here, Wayne, here's my fears, your fears coming true, right? And he's like, I just wanted to tell you that I learned how to do my job watching all your videos. So,
Oh boy.
so I laughed and laughed, and I thought, boy, that's sad. That's how they're learning how to do their job, watching me. But yeah, so it's. I mean, I think that part of it is a little bit of a persona, but I do get mad and I do get worked up. So, it's just me being true to myself. I was thinking to myself, and I've thought this often when you said at the beginning before we came on that sort of your audience is a lot of times sort of the bigger firms. I don't think my shtick would work with a big firm. I'd have to run it past the managing partners. I'd probably get hauled in once a month. And I've actually had two big law firms in St. Louis ask me to consider joining them. And I've specifically not done that because I don't want the limits on what I can say.
Oh yeah, and whether it's conflict checking your own your YouTube videos before you send them out, not even for true conflicts, but for positional conflicts, because what you're talking about could be an issue if someday a client at the firm was in that
Yeah.
predicament, right? And the
Yeah.
video.
Well, yeah. One of the, sorry to cut you off. One of the firms that asked me to join later on, one of their partners became the ambassador to a country over in Europe. So that totally would have shut me down.
Yeah, right. And you would have been stifled creatively, and it would have
Mhm.
been just a nightmare from that point on. Talk to me a little bit about when you started to see YouTube, quote unquote, working in whatever definition of working you want to use. Meaning, obviously the person in New York came up to you. That's incredible. But were you seeing clients come in the door? Did you see it as a lead generation magnet? Did you see it almost as a referral attractor? What role did the YouTube videos play for your marketing at the get-go, and where has that evolved over time?
Well, like I said, it did evolve. And the first thing was an overnight comment. Oh my gosh, somebody was watching my video while I was asleep, right? Then the next one was, oh my gosh, someone called the office because they saw my YouTube video. So now, the biggest thing is to get someone to raise their hand and to say, I'm considering hiring you, right? Then the next one was when somebody actually hired us. And then after that, then what happened, Wayne, is I swear to God, people started flying to St. Louis to meet with me, even though there were immigration lawyers in Dallas and in Denver. I remember those were sort of the two of the earlier ones where
Wow.
people came all that when one drove and one flew. So I was like, wow, that's crazy. And so at first, Wayne, for a long, long time, I thought that the magic of YouTube was to get them to raise their hand. And it does do that. But the real value, the real power of YouTube, it's the same as this podcast for you. And that is that when you listen to someone in your ear over and over and over again, that you start to realize who they really are. Like your personality will come through when you have this podcast going for a couple of years, your personality will come through. So people really come to know you, and I mean know you. They know that people now know the things that piss me off at immigration. They know what I'm going to say. There's people that predict what I'm going to say sometimes on videos and things. So I think that really, really, really sort of just comes through is that when you build that relationship, it's an asynchronous relationship, but they feel like they know you, even though you've never met them. So when I would walk into these rooms, I'd walk into a consult, I swear to God, people would jump up and say, oh my God, it's Mr. Jim. I can't believe it. Like I was a movie star, right? So and they'll go, I watched all your videos, all of them. Yeah. All of your videos. I watch every single one. I mean, and it's free. I mean, other than the work, I mean, YouTube doesn't charge me anything. In fact, now they give me money for clicks and things on my channel.
And it's incredible how, if you think about the printed word, the written word, that can convey knowledge and wisdom, and that can get people to know you and perhaps trust you. But the multimedia aspect, the videos, the podcasts, it fills in that like factor. And really, when you're looking at 3 or 4 potential immigration attorneys who seem to be doing all the same stuff in terms of the work they do, what their website says, but to be able to see Jim Hacking's personality come through, and if you like what Jim has to say, and there's just something about the vibe that he gives off in his videos or in his podcast, wow, that is going to be a magnet. And I think it's obviously not just law. It's not just direct-to-consumer law. It's any aspect of professional services and really probably any aspect of business, but especially direct-to-consumer, where for so long, consumers, clients have looked at lawyers in their suits and jackets, posing in front of law books, and thought, whoa, that person's like out of, just out of my caliber. I can't deal with them. I'm stressed. They might not even want to call you if you look like that because they're intimidated. But here's Jim on YouTube. He seems approachable. I like him. He's funny. And then boom, you have that relationship going. How have you been able to deal with the fact that it's your face, it's Jim hacking law practice on YouTube, and then you have people who want to talk to you. They want to have Mr. Jim as their attorney. They want to talk to him. How did you handle that? I've got to assume that was an issue at some point in terms of the intake process and the overall lawyering at Hacking Law Practice.
It took a really long time. And for a long time, Wayne, I thought that I was the only magical one who could sign people up. And back in those old days, I actually thought that it was me and only me who could convince people to hire me. And I went through a tortuous process, went through torture, disabusing myself of that notion. And what happened was, our friend Gary Falkowitz, he and I did a podcast series. It's 7 episodes long, Inside Maximum Lawyer, of me coming to terms with the fact that I wasn't going to be able to scale this firm if I was doing everything. And I was convinced that I had to talk to the people on the phone, that I had to be the one to send them the contract, that I had to be the one to do the consults. And if you listen to these episodes, the first 3 are me literally writhing in pain like a fish on the deck of a boat, arguing there's no way that anybody else can do this as well as I do. Well, by the end of that episode, and that was about 2 years ago, those episodes, we completely transitioned out. I do very, very few consults. We have a whole leads team that does it. We have lawyers that do it. I just do a little bit every now and then because I like to keep my foot in the door or keep my hand in it. But it definitely takes a mindset shift. You have to realize you're not that important. You're not that big. And so with the YouTube, the way that we've done it is Mr. Jim. I mean, one is my wife works here and she says, Mr. Jim isn't going to be the one that's going to help you. Mr. Jim's not going to be the one to save your ass. Mr. Jim's spending all of his time making videos. So as long as you think through how you're going to handle it, as long as you make sure that the leads team or me or whoever signs up the case makes it clear that they're not going to be working with me and that sort of I'm always there to be a resource that they want to bounce things off of. And, we probably have a little bit of puffery about how much I'm still involved in. It drives my wife and the other lawyers crazy because they'll do all the work on the case and the person will thank them, but also say, and a big thank you to Mr. Jim, even though I didn't do anything on the case.
I should have asked this in the beginning. How big is your firm currently in terms of attorneys and staff?
Yeah. So right now we have 7 attorneys and a total staff of 43.
Wow. And you're making a point without knowing you're making the point, which is when you have your marketing down and your business development down, you can then build the firm that you want to build in terms of people and the people to create the staff, to create the processes and the procedures and the systems. Because if your marketing isn't bringing in the clients, then you don't have the funds with which to hire people, or vice versa. You can't invest first in people and cross your fingers that the money will come, because if it doesn't, then you're in trouble and you're going to have to figure out other ways to fund the firm or lay people off. So you nailing the marketing has helped you build the firm that reflects what you want out of it. And obviously, if you're an associate or an income partner at a 1,000-lawyer law firm, you might not have that kind of flexibility. But if you're at a boutique firm, if you're at a 10-attorney firm or a 20-attorney firm or a 5-attorney firm, that marketing, that increased client flow through the firm helps you fund it and fund its growth and to build it the way you want to build it.
There's lots of little angles to what you're saying, Wayne. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I mean, to me, it's sort of simple in that you could be the best lawyer in the world, but if nobody knows your name, it doesn't matter, right? And so, there's always that pressure or that conflict between those who bring in the work and those who do the work. But like I said, I had worked at 2 firms where I had seen the owner of the firm cussing out really nice guys because they could, because they had the client. So I think that burned in my brain and in my heart. I never wanted to let that happen to me. So I've been obsessed on the marketing. I've been obsessed on the growth. I've been obsessed on making sure that I have as many clients as I can get. And I'm also, Wayne, I'm in this interesting, fun, cool space, which is how far can I go? Right? Like, how far can I go? It's sort of like almost a limitless thing. And, it sort of drives everybody crazy because we keep growing and keep adding more people, and there's still lots of work to do. So it's sort of crazy. But if you don't do that, if you don't put that first, nothing else matters.
Yeah, there's no fuel for your car, for your rocket ship, whatever vehicle you happen to be on in terms of your growth trajectory. And it's funny you talk about the power and maybe even the privilege you have when you bring in clients. I remember walking the halls at my old law firm, Deckert, when I was a junior associate. The rainmakers, the people who I learned eventually were the rainmakers, seemed to have a much more pleasant disposition and demeanor, even at a huge billion-dollar international law firm like that, compared to the income partners. And it took me a while to realize that obviously not all partners are the same. And the income partners were busy billing the clients, billing 2,500 hours plus a year of client work. They had to keep the equity partners and the rainmakers happy. And then on top of that, they were expected to contribute a couple hundred hours a year to their own marketing and BD efforts versus the rainmakers who were charismatic, brought in clients. Obviously, it took them a while, but they were able to bring in clients and they pushed them down to those income partners. And they were much more smiley in the hallway because A, they were making more money, B, they had more freedom, and C, they weren't trapped. They knew, as we're seeing now in the industry, that they were in a way kind of like free agents, where if they built relationship with their clients, those clients would follow them to another firm at the drop of a hat. They had a kind of security in their book of business. And if you are at a smaller firm, you can have that security in your marketing, in your content, knowing that people are going to listen to your podcast forever, read your blog, watch your YouTube videos. They're going to consume your content because you've created a connection with them and referrals and all that stuff. So it really shows you the long tail that content has.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that one thing that's really important too that I did early on is that I as much as I could, I broke the connection between bringing in the business and doing the business, because as long as you're the one doing the work, you're going to artificially throttle, either consciously or subconsciously, bringing in more work. If you have 7 naturalization cases to get out the door and an eighth person calls up and you're like, Jesus, I got to get these other 7, maybe I'll put them off and let them sign up next month. But the other thing besides the YouTube and the hyper focus on marketing that really helped us grow is that I'm inherently lazy and I don't like doing the legal work. And so I got other people to do the legal work. And then what Dean Jackson would say is the before unit's job is to deliver as many high quality cases as possible. And as long as you have a department that's doing that, that does not have to be concerned at all with the work that's being done, that's not their job, that's someone else's job, that when you break that connection, that's like rocket fuel for growth.
There is a wonderful feeling I had recently, and I'm sure you had this, and anybody who's following in your footsteps and understands what you're talking about will have, which is the day that you are able to increase capacity at your business to handle more work because you are not the primary technician doing the work, you almost have to stand back and be like, wow, this is awesome. Because now, and you nailed it, there is something self-conscious that goes on in our brain, like, well, I'm not sure I could handle that client. I'm going to be really busy next month and I'm going on vacation. And you find ways to not get back or at least not maximize that opportunity. Whereas if you've got another Jim or another Wayne behind you working, well, guess what? Their plate has some space. Bring that client onto their plate. And it is liberating, just like having a flow of clients, having that capacity, knowing there are people who can do that work. It is a phenomenal feeling because if you've been there being the primary technician, man, it sucks when you have to look at a new client in the eye or over Zoom and doubt that you want them, even though you know you could do the work, do it well, and probably for a nice fee, but you're just terrified of how it's going to screw up your life. That's not a place you want to be.
And I'm especially crazy because I'll go hire those people to do the work before I have all of the work, knowing that that'll force me to go out and do the marketing to bring in more work.
Yeah, look, I mean, we are motivated by different things, and you obviously like to light the fire underneath your rear and then jump off it and get going. I want to wrap up this section about the YouTube efforts with a couple more questions. I'm curious, do you think that a lawyer could have a business-to-business practice that has grown through YouTube?
Absolutely. People do business, like I said, with those that they know, like, and trust. So we have business clients who have found us on YouTube, this is sort of in the H-1B employment visa and the employment green card route. But yeah, absolutely. So throw me out an example of a B2B attorney that you would be thinking about.
Okay, so let's talk about someone who maybe is a lawyer who does regulatory work for drug companies.
Oh, geez. Yeah. I mean, you could make content all day long about that. We talked a little bit earlier about having a bully to market against. You could talk about the FDA, about overreach. You could talk about, this company just got smacked down because they put some things in their medical descriptions that aren't accurate, or, I mean, you could do content all day long. And so there's an audience out there for that. And YouTube is owned by Google. And, you were talking about long tail searches. Long tail search is sort of what I do. I don't do any videos like I'm the best immigration lawyer. I do videos very, very far down the food chain and content wise of like very specific stuff. And when people need to look for it, that's going to come up on YouTube. And then once they find your videos, and if you do it in a somewhat professional way, I would think that you could go all day long and build that connection with people before they even pick up the phone to hire you.
And on a related note, most firms, especially direct-to-consumer firms, are going to use YouTube as a lead generation device. I'm curious, have you found that you're now considered a thought leader in immigration? For example, the ideas that you're putting forth aren't just there to bring clients in, but organizers of conferences or, other people who are in the immigration world, do they look at your videos not as them as potential clients, but they look at you and say, wow, you're a leader in this industry, you're a leader in U.S. immigration law, and you've gotten opportunities because of that?
Well, you're my go-to guy when it comes to media relations. I don't think necessarily that in industry that people look at my stuff and think that way, but certainly reporters do. So I've been found by many kind of reporters asked for comments based on things where they find an adjacent article like that in YouTube.
Yeah. I mean, and again, this goes back to your point, which is that YouTube is the second largest search engine, and that I would have to believe that people might search Google first and then they go on YouTube, or Google surfaces the YouTube search results on the Google page. So if you have the right keywords and you're talking about the things that people are looking for, whether it's on a blog or in a YouTube video, people will find you, and there's your YouTube video proving you as a thought leader, not just trying to get you leads for your law firm.
And the other thing is that, you spend all this time in front of a camera, you get pretty good at talking in front of a camera. You figure out what works. You figure out what tenor of your voice works. I could stand in front of a camera and talk about immigration. I just did this the other day for a college class. I talked for an hour off the top of my head I walked them through the whole immigration system and everything. And I didn't have a note or anything. You just get used to, talking and thinking, how that is in front of a camera, and you just get better and better at it.
Yeah, I always enjoy looking at my old videos from 2018 where, I'm like almost whispering, not great lighting, a little awkward. And now I feel very natural looking at the video camera lens of my iPhone and just talking into it. There might not be someone right now on the other side of it, but eventually when this is published, there'll be people watching. I want to take the last few minutes of our conversation and talk about Maximum Lawyer, because you and I connected through Maximum Lawyer way back in 2017, thanks to our mutual friend, Will Eady. And what you're doing, what you and Tyson Mutrux are doing with Maximum Lawyer, to me is amazing, because you have created a community through content. You still have your podcast, you have the Facebook group that complements the podcast, but then you have courses, you have a conference that is now going to be the fourth, I think, iteration, 17, 18, 19, I guess more, 18, 19, 20, 21, whatever it is. You have a conference coming up later this year, all through just you and your co-host and co-founder, Tyson Mutrux, just riffing on the law. And I'm curious if we can get into that, because that is something that I think we're seeing now with Web3 community and how you can build a community and build a brand and build a pack of people who will follow you and trust you and buy your products and services. So talk a little bit about the founding of Maximum Lawyer, how you would define it today and how it got started.
I would recommend a book to your listeners, and it's called Tribes by Seth Godin. It's one of the first books I read when I went out on my own and shortly before we started the podcast. So, a couple of years before we started the podcast, but in there, Seth Godin talks about how people are feeling very disconnected now. And to the extent that you can gather people together with technology, in the old days, we would just go down to the VFW hall and have a beer on Tuesday nights and talk about everything. But now, Maximum Lawyer, we had a Zoom happy hour the other night. So, Maximum Lawyer started in 2015 based on some conversations Tyson and I were having. So we really enjoyed talking about running a law firm, and that's the part he liked talking about, and I really liked talking about marketing a law firm. So the first 10 episodes or so are just he and I talking about, we were just sort of recreating conversations we had, and we recorded them. And to your point, they were the audio on them were garbage. We would pause because a motorcycle went by or a train went by, and it was just us talking. And then we started getting guests, and then we started the Facebook group. We built a little following, and now that Facebook group has about 6,000 members, and it's very much a growth oriented, growth mindset. Any negativity, we kick people out. It's very collaborative, very supportive. We got to meet some friends, and we had our first conference. And you did such a great job presenting at that conference on dealing with local media. And I remember you were the most organized of all the people. You had a great panel. You actually talked to your panel members beforehand. You had your outline done way ahead of time. But through that, we've sort of become friends with a lot of lawyers. We have a little laboratory. I feel like we can find out best practices. For me, it's a great networking thing. I do a lot of these lawsuits, so I have local counsel in locations far and wide. It's just been a great thing. Now we have, as you mentioned, the Guild, which is sort of like our little paid coaching group. That has about 170 members in it, and we just sort of talk about these issues on a more micro level. We do hot seats, we have masterminds, and we just sort of talk things through, really always with the goal of helping people sort of build the best firm that they want, and sort of giving them the freedom and the authority to pick what in a law firm they like to do and find the other people to do it. Because there's so much to be done in a law firm that you really can pick what your strengths are and what you like doing the most, and then find other people who are strong at those things to do all the stuff that you don't want to do.
And the fascinating thing about Maximum Lawyer, given my background, which is the big law background, almost everything that's discussed is applicable to a lawyer as much at 1,000-person law firm as it is at a solo or a 2-person law firm, because the fundamentals of running a legal practice and building it are the same. It just depends on scale, because even at these large multinational, multi-billion-dollar law firms, the practice groups are like mini law firms where you've got a 30-person, FDA practice or a 30-person information security practice. And the things that we talk about and that you talk about, delegation, marketing, business development / sales, mindset, it's all the same. It's just on a different scale when you're dealing with you and your partner in your small personal injury firm in the Midwest versus your large law firm on one of the coasts. So I think you have done a great job, and certainly there are plenty of big law alumni in there. There are attorneys from medium-sized law firms and large law firms in there. It really has a mix, and I think that's so important, because you all are not just talking about SEO or pay-per-click for criminal defense firms. You're talking about much bigger concepts that have wide applicability to any law practice. I can't help but wonder, I'm going to ask you this question because it's related to the YouTube work. If you did not build such a thriving law firm where you could hand off your work that you got through your marketing efforts, could you have built Maximum Lawyer? Would you have had the time to build Maximum Lawyer?
No. We are consistent. So we built in the consistency early on. That is important both for the YouTube channel for me and for the podcast. We've never missed a week in 6 years. And so again, just making sure that you have that dedicated time, like me with the videos. We have every Tuesday at 8 a.m. we record without fail, and then we record extras to have some in the can. But no, some of the best episodes are about mistakes that I make, right? Like, so, I'm very vulnerable. I try to share, like, people really like the stuff when they hear the mistakes you made. I think there's a little bit of voyeurism to it. There's a little bit of, boy, I better not do that. There's, I can learn from Jim or Tyson's mistakes. I think those are the best. But yeah, I mean, if I were slogging away doing all this work, I never would have had time to even have the bandwidth to create this stuff. That's part of the thing, is that I've always been pretty good about finding mental space away from the moment to moment urgent stuff. I spend a lot of time on the important but not urgent stuff in the Stephen Covey quads. So yeah, I think that you've got to say to yourself, there's always going to be a lot of things pulling at me. If I don't make the conscious effort to not let them take all my time, you're never going to grow, you're never going to create, and you're never going to improvise.
You mentioned kind of vulnerability and being willing to admit your faults. It's so funny how that theme can resonate both with your own marketing and on your YouTube or on your podcasts, all the way to the Maximum Lawyer Group. And I think that's what probably pulls those people in, pulls the members in, just like your clients are pulled in or your prospects are pulled in through vulnerability. When you're a real person, people get to know you, they see your warts, and guess what? They still like you. They still want to have a relationship with you. And I think that's a great point to end on, that even in the marketing world where we want to appear polished and professional because the people on the other end, especially in a business to business legal practice, are professional, are polished, but they're still human beings, right? They still, at the end of the day, they don't want to read your 2,000 word corporate immigration white paper. They probably want to open up TikTok or Facebook or Instagram and just be entertained. And sometimes entertainment comes in the form of video, sometimes it comes in the form of a podcast, but just, again, being understanding that your clients can develop relationships with you through content, through YouTube videos, through podcasts, without you having to do anything except publishing it, right? And it works for you 24/7, 365. I think Joe Polish always talks about canning and cloning your message. The fact that there's Jim hacking on YouTube at literally 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365. Someone can find him even when he's outside having a catch with his kids or traveling across the country. It's always working for him. His marketing is always working for him.
And I think that's a great point. And I think that a lot of people miss out on that, and they forget the one thing you just mentioned, which is don't be boring. Like, be interesting, be fun, and people will come back for more. If there's one knock I have on a lot of people that do sort of corporate YouTube, it's like, my gosh, it's like watching paint dry. Like, I'm not saying you have to be, inflammatory, but at least be interesting and try to make it a little fun.
Yeah, and you sometimes hear in the legal world where people are trying to distinguish one potential lawyer from another in terms of joining the firm. And sometimes the question is, well, if I was trapped, at least back in the day it was, if I was trapped in a warehouse reviewing documents for a matter, do I want to be trapped with this person or this person? Do I want to be stuck on an airplane or at an airplane bar waiting for our flight with this person or this person? So again, it goes to the know, like, trust. I mean, it's easy to know, easy to trust, but the like factor really makes all the difference. Jim, I appreciate your time today. It's been a blast, as always, connecting with you. Can you give us some links or some places to check you and the Hacking Law Practice out?
Sure. So, so on YouTube, it's Hacking Law Practice, at Jim Hacking for Twitter, at Immigration Hacking for TikTok. We're having a lot of fun on TikTok. My 12-year-old daughter is in charge of my TikTok channel, and I said to her, "Hey, Nor, for every 1,000 followers you get me, I'll give you $100." So on Sunday, we had 660 TikTok followers. We made a TikTok video in the front yard. It as of right now, it has 640,000 views, and we have 7,000 followers in 1 week.
Wow.
So now I owe her $700. I was just writing myself the check to go give her the cash. She's very excited, but it gets to that point of being interesting and making it fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to put my son to work. He's 9 years old. My wife used to write a daily comic strip in the Syracuse University newspaper called the Daily Orange, and my son has her creativity genes, and he likes to do comics. So I'm asking him to do a comic for me that I'm going to make as hopefully part of my marketing down the road. We'll see if that sticks. But yeah, I'm giving him a job, and we're going to see what he can create and what he can build with his creativity. So it's so much fun to involve your family, right? Like, Why not,
Awesome.
right? You run your business, involve your kids, and everyone benefits.
Thanks, brother.
All right, Jim, I'll talk to you soon. Thanks again for your time.
Great seeing you.
Well, that's a wrap for this episode of Legally Contented. Thanks so much for tuning in. Check out the episode show notes for more information about our guests and for links to resources that we discussed during the episode. We'd appreciate your feedback and recommendations for future guests. Email us at hello@legallycontented.com, hello@legallycontented.com. We would appreciate if you told your colleagues about this podcast, if you subscribe to the podcast and urge them to subscribe as well. And while you're at it, maybe you could even rate and review the podcast on your favorite podcast player. Until next time, thanks so much for tuning in to Legally Contented.